Hello. Welcome to Amateur Radio's East Coast Reflector magazine. The ECR is an all-volunteer run system that never charges to get on the air or to read the magazine. So feel free to click subscribe to give us a little boost. Donations are accepted at eastcoastreflector.com. Please enjoy the magazine.
Dick's Corner by WB2JPQ. The East Coast Reflector team once again had the privilege of attending the Orlando Hamcation, and it was an unforgettable experience. We want to extend a big heartfelt thank you to everyone who stopped by our tables for the opportunity to put faces to call signs and connect with old friends. Our team was especially excited to meet many amateurs who tune in to the ECR but have never yet taken the step to push their PTT button. Encouraging them to get on the system was a highlight. We'd also like to express our gratitude to the volunteers who helped make the event a success. A big thank you goes out to K1AOS, KB2QBQ, KB2UDB, KD8UTP, KE8VKY, KG4BUT, KO4FRR, KO4QMM, N1CBM, W2CMT, W2EM, W2PUT, W2PW, W2KJV, WA5AIR, and WB8ODF for their dedication and hard work. One of the special moments of the Hamcation weekend was our annual Friday night dinner. This year, it was at Miller's Ale House in Altamonte Springs, Florida, and Vicky, KE8VKY, was presented with the East Coast Reflector Amateur of the Year plaque for 2024, recognizing her outstanding contributions to the system and Vicky's dedication to the ECR, and we were thrilled to honor her. Looking forward, our next big event is the Dayton Hamfest, set to take place from May 15th to 17th in Xenia, Ohio. We'll have Flea Market 7585 to 7588. Another exciting event to mark on your calendars is our third annual Western New York Meet and Greet, which will be held on June 21st at Chestnut Ridge Park in Orchard Park, New York. If you plan to attend, be sure to email Randy at ecrmg@w2rbc.com to reserve your space. Spots are limited, so act fast. And speaking of getting on the air, how many of you got your amateur radio license to only listen? If you haven't used the system yet, now is the perfect time. Remember, we encourage QSOs to take a break after 15 minutes as a courtesy to everyone. As always, thank you to the incredible ECR family of users, listeners, and volunteers for making the East Coast Reflector the largest moving group in the U.S. with activities happening every day of the week. There's never a dull moment. Let's keep the conversations going. 7-3.
Open Mic Net Contest. The ECR has something special in the works. We're putting together an Open Mic Net Control Contest, starting Wednesday, March 12th at 8 p.m. Pre-registration is required so we can make sure you've got the log and are set up with the ECR team. If you're interested in being a net controller on our Open Mic Net, sign up at bit.ly/ECR Open Mic. We're finishing up the details, so stay tuned for more information.
Meet and Greet 2025. It's that time again already. The annual Western New York ECR Meet and Greet is approaching quickly. Join us on June 21st for a gathering of food and friends. It's $15 at the door. Kids 12 and under are free. You're welcome to come alone or bring the family. RSVP at ECRMG@w2rbc.com. Space is limited. Don't delay.
Connect to ECR. For a printable list of ways to connect, go to bit.ly/ECRConnect. For a list of known full-time repeaters, go to eastcoastreflector.com and scroll down to the map. ECR Aeronautical Mobile Net. The ECR would like to give a warm welcome to Alex, K1AOS, and Carlos, N1CBM, the pilots of the new Aeronautical Mobile Net. Join the Facebook chat under events at facebook.com/W2ECR to stay current. Flights may be delayed or canceled. This is the best way to stay current. Times, days, and frequencies vary and may change without notice. Ask an Elmer recurring Zoom room event. Ask an Elmer, be an Elmer, or just come and listen, where your questions and your knowledge are an asset to amateur radio. Every first and third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. To enter the Zoom room, go to bit.ly/ECR daily.
The Antenna Farm by Charles, KC6U-FM. Part 29, Full Wave Loop Antennas. Hello, ECR family, and welcome to the Antenna Farm. This is your friendly antenna farmer, Charles, KC6U-FM. As always with the Antenna Farm topics, I welcome any and all feedback from you, the reader. I am almost always monitoring the East Coast Reflector, and my email is on my QRZ page. I am also on the ECR for almost every Tuesday night TechNet, so this will be a great place to ask questions too. Feel free to reach out to me with any comments or questions. But there's a new and, in my opinion, great place to ask questions about the Antenna Farm or antenna systems in general. Join me, along with other Elmers, in the East Coast Reflector Zoom room on the first and third Thursdays of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern for the Ask an Elmer Be an Elmer event. This is a chance for all hams, especially those new to the hobby, to ask questions that may be too involved to get answers from the TechNet. I look forward to you joining us and asking your questions. This time, we're heading back to the Antenna Farm proper and taking a look at a simple, effective antenna, the full wave loop antenna. It will be of some benefit for you to go back and have a look at the Antenna Farm article number 24, where we talk about the cubical quad antenna in the ECR magazine volume number 9. There's some good info there relating to a full wave loop when used as a driven element in a directional antenna. For this visit to the Antenna Farm, we're going to restrict the discussion to horizontally mounted loops, that is, the conductors parallel to the ground. As the name implies, a full wave loop antenna is nothing more than a conductor formed into a loop that is a full wavelength long, electrically, at the design frequency. At lower frequencies, wire is almost universally used, but at VHF and above, tubing is a practical solution. From a purely theoretical view, the most efficient loop is a perfect circle. A circle gives the best pattern and gain, but there are mechanical issues of the circular loop, especially at lower frequencies, mostly related to supporting the loop. For practical reasons, at low UHF and below, the simplest solution is to use a square loop. Yes, you give up some gain and efficiency, but you only need 4 support points. You will sometimes hear square loops called quad loops, and a triangular shape is also commonly used, sometimes called a delta loop, needing only 3 supports. Other polygons can be used as needed to fit into a given space. In a practical solution, the several sides should be as close to the same length as possible. While this equality of wire segments is desired, it is not an actual requirement, and the antenna will not suffer very much if the lengths vary a bit. Sticking to the practicality of a loop, where these antennas really shine is at the lower frequencies. Just as an example, let's think about a 4-sided loop for the ADM band. I'll remind you here, to calculate the length of the wire for a dipole, you'll use the rough formula of length in feet equals 468/f, where f is the frequency in megahertz. So, a half-wave dipole for 3.75 megahertz will be about 125 feet long. Each half of the dipole will be around 63 feet. This means you will, ideally, need a span of at least 125 feet to string up the dipole. Also keep in mind that the dipole radiates best broadside to wire, so it will be somewhat bidirectional, and the gain will be 0 dBd or about 2.15 dBi. The feed point impedance will be about 73 ohms in free space, usually dropping to around 35 ohms in practical installations. For a full wave loop, the formula to calculate the approximate wire length is length in feet equals 1005/f, where f is the frequency in megahertz. For a full wave loop at 3.75 megahertz, the wire will need to be about 268 feet long, and each of the 4 sides will be 67 feet long. In our 4-sided example, we'll need 4 support points spaced at 67 feet. The free space impedance of a full wave loop is around 120 ohms. In most practical installations, this will fall to about 50 ohms. I hope that number sounds familiar to you. Now, pay attention because here's the important part. The full wave loop mounted with the wires parallel to the ground will have an omnidirectional pattern, be horizontally polarized, and will have a gain of about 1.5 dBd or 3.65 dBi. In other words, the full wave loop will tend to perform better than a dipole. There are a few other benefits to the full wave loop, A full-wave loop tends to present a better match to common coax than a dipole in a practical, real-world installation. As you have probably realized by now, the loop is a balanced antenna, so some form of common mode choke should be used at the feed point. Again, I don't like transformers. They are lossy, frequency-dependent, a pain in the neck to build, and expensive to buy. Just coil up about 6 turns of coax on a 6-inch form and call it good. A full-wave loop tends to be quieter on receive than either a dipole or vertical. This has to do with the way the current flows on the wires in a manner that cancels out noise, as well as the fact that there is more wire in the air. As the old saying goes, you can't work them if you can't hear them. A full-wave loop has a variety of possible mounting options. The obvious mounting solution is to put up 4 poles to the corners of your loop antenna, but that isn't your only option. If your house has a perimeter of at least the length of the wire, you can attach the wire to the eaves of your house. Trees make good supports, too. Again, in a perfect world, the several sides of the loop should all be the same length, but the world isn't perfect, and the world won't end if the sides are slightly different lengths. It should be noted that the radiation pattern of full-wave loop will have a slight peak on the side where the feed point is located, but it is very small, typically less than 0.5 dB. One interesting mounting option for a full-wave loop at 6M or higher frequencies is on mobile. Use tubing to make the antenna and mount on the roof of your car, perhaps to a luggage rack. These are sold under a number of names, most notably the Squallow Antenna by Cushcraft. A full-wave loop tends to have a slightly wider usable bandwidth than a dipole. With that said, while it is possible to use a full-wave loop on multiple bands, you will need a good external antenna matching unit tuner to do so. Generally speaking, the built-in matching system in most radios won't do the job for multiple band operation. A full-wave loop is dirt cheap. All you need is a wire, an insulator at the feed point, and supports. Don't buy a balun. Just coil up a few feet of coax. You probably have everything except the supports. Got trees? Feeding the full-wave loop is very simple. Break the loop at some point and put in a suitable insulator between the 2 wire ends. Dog bone and egg-type insulators work well. Keep in mind that there's a very small peak in the radiation pattern on the feed point side. In practice, it doesn't matter too much exactly where you break the loop for your feed point. I have always just picked a spot that is convenient. Connect one lead of the coax to one end of the wire of the insulator and the other coax lead to the other wire. Seal the connections against water intrusion. Make a coil of coax consisting of about 6 turns on a 6-inch form as a common mode choke. Tuning a full-wave loop is also simple. Just shorten or lengthen the wire as needed. An antenna analyzer or nano-VNA is a great help here. Since the antenna is a loop, you don't need to worry about adding wire in more than one place. As you can see, the full-wave loop offers a number of advantages to the ham. The only real disadvantage is a need for 3 or more supports spaced properly for the length of a wire. Next time on the Antenna Farm, we're going to take a look at long wire antennas. They're probably not what you think. If you know of an antenna construction article on the web, please drop me a note with the pertinent information, and I will look at it for consideration as an article for the Antenna Farm. Take care in 73. Charles, KC6UFM.
Text line 716-317-9050. Text in your call sign to get on the log. The Morning Brew is a popular fast-paced net. It can be difficult for new hams, digital, or EchoLink users to get through the pileups. The text line helps to ease the pileups and get more hams on the air. No in and outs accepted. No earlier than 30 minutes before the net.
Connections. There are many ways to connect to ECR. For a printable list, go to bit.ly/ECR Connect. There, you will find the information to connect via ADN, DMR, DVSwitch, EchoLink, Hamshack Hotline, Hams over IP, IRLP, and Yaesu Fusion.
Consider being a contributor. Send in your article, project write-up, pictures, story, comments, and suggestions to editor.ecr@gmail.com. You don't have to be a good writer if you have a good story. Everything will be polished and sent to you for review before it's published. Audio feed. There's a new audio feed on the website. We still have the old one, too, but now we have one live feed and one feed that has a 2.5-minute delay. Need an audio check? To hear what your audio sounds like, load up Listen Live on the website, pick up your radio, give your call sign, and say, "This is a test. No response needed." Still stumped? Come to our Zoom room for advice at bit.ly/ECR daily.
Using Oscilloscopes by Harry SM0VPO. I have recently been asked if I would provide some information regarding the use of an oscilloscope, so I have put together this document as a start for those who wish to learn a little of the use of the instrument in amateur radio. If you have any suggestions for improving this document, then please give me a call. My addresses will appear at the foot of this article. This information is not intended as a definitive work regarding the use of oscilloscopes, merely a little information to get you started and show some of the possibilities. The oscilloscope, often called simply a scope, is nothing more than an instrument for displaying electrical signals in the time domain. In other words, you can view waveforms on it. Some of the uses of the scope may not be obvious, but if you already possess one, then you will most probably regard it as the most useful tool on your workbench. Controls. A basic and fictitious oscilloscope is shown above. This is a dual-beam oscilloscope, although most of the information presented here is also applicable to a single-beam oscilloscope. The basic controls are bright, brilliance. This adjusts the intensity of the display. Focus. Adjusts the focusing of the display. Graticule illuminates a scale used to measure a trace. Trace. Channel, etc. Selects which trace is to be displayed. Trigger. Selects a trigger source. Trigger level. Selects the point of the waveform used to trigger. Time base. Selects the speed the trace moves across the tube face. Input level. Adjusts the input level. POS. Position sets the position of the trace on the display. The scope will also have an input socket for each input channel, situated on the front of the instrument. There will most probably be more controls on your scope, and I will try to cover some of these later on. Bright. This is self-explanatory. It controls the intensity of the display. It is well worth remembering that one cannot execute screensaver programs on an oscilloscope, so leaving the scope with a high brilliance will certainly burn the trace into the tube face. If you must leave your scope switched on for any length of time, then turn the brilliance control down. Focus. The focus control is also quite self-explanatory, but most scopes seem to adjust a single spot from a short horizontal to a vertical line. A single horizontal line is therefore not the best waveform to adjust the focusing. This is best done whilst viewing a waveform. Graticule. Scale illuminates a scale used to measure a trace. This is usually just a clear plastic sheet placed over the tube face and shows a matrix of 1 centimeter squares. By comparing the matrix with a waveform, it is possible to measure such things as frequency and voltage. If this control is turned down, then the scale will not be seen. Trace or channel selects which trace is to be displayed. There are usually 2 or more selections possible. Selects trace A only. Single channel. B. Selects trace B only. Single channel. A plus B. Selects both trace A and trace B. Dual channel. Add. Both channel inputs are added and displayed as a single trace. Trigger travel. A trace displaying a waveform without the use of trigger will roll in much the same way as a TV with the horizontal hold set wrongly. Trigger action will stop the trace from starting until a determined part of the waveform occurs. This will make each sweep of the tube face occur in exactly the same place, and the display will appear to be stationary. The trigger level control is used to select that point of the waveform. Trigger selector selects the trigger source. Most dual beam scopes may be triggered from either channel A or channel B. Many oscilloscopes have the facility to trigger from an external source. In this case, an extra trigger input on the front panel will be provided. Time base The speed the spot travels across the screen of the tube may be varied by means of the time-based selector switch. This is calibrated in seconds, milliseconds, or microseconds. Input level. Adjust the input level of each channel so that the trace display will fit on the screen. This is a switch calibrated in volts per centimeter. Position. Sets the vertical location of the trace on the tube so that the display is positioned in a manner more comfortable to read. For example, you may wish to set 0 volts to the graticule mid-position for AC measurements or to the bottom of the tube face for DC measurements. Basic operations. By way of example, connect a lead to channel A input, then hold with your bare hand the center conductor of the wire. You will see some rubbish on the screen, which is the 50 Hz, 60 Hz in some countries. Mains, which is being received by your body. Set the time base to 10 milliseconds/div and the channel A input level to a setting that does not go off the screen. You should see a waveform such as is shown below. On the trigger input, select channel. Adjust the trigger control slowly, and at some setting of the control, the display will become stationary. If the trigger control has an auto position, then select it, and you do not need to adjust anything. The waveform you see will not look exactly like that shown above, as there will be loads of distortion. This is due to many things, mainly because you are picking up spurious signals radiated by household electrical equipment such as TVs, fluorescent lamps, etc. All these items distort signals in one form or another. If you look at the waveform, you will see that there are 2 horizontal red divisions on the graticule scale between 2 consecutive peaks. Since the time base is set to 10 milliseconds/div, it will take the spot 20 milliseconds to travel between the 2 divisions. The period time of the waveform is therefore 20 milliseconds. The frequency of the waveform is 1 divided by 0.02 is equal to 50 Hz. Now look at the vertical scale. The center line is 0 volts, and the waveform moves both 1.8 divisions above and below the center line, and if the input level is set to 1 volt per centimeter, the level of the input is 1.8 volts plus 1.8 volts equals 3.6 volts peak to peak. This equates to 3.6 volts times 0.35 equals about 1.2 volts RMS, as you would read it on a voltmeter. In this way, you can measure the frequency and voltage, amplitude, of just about any waveform. Oscilloscope inputs. The input impedance of the oscilloscope is very high, so it will not load a circuit under test. Most oscilloscopes have an AC-DC switch at the input to each channel. When set to DC, the channel trace will move up or down by an amount proportional to the value of the DC voltage. If set to AC, then the DC voltage component of the input will be removed, allowing you to view only the AC component. This feature is useful for measuring the ripple that may be present on a power supply. Take, for example, the following circuit diagram and test setup. Here, the oscilloscope has both its inputs connected to the DC output of a homemade 12-volt DC power supply unit. Trace B is set to 5 volt per centimeter DC, and only a single is displayed. The horizontal line will have moved up the tube face by just over 2 centimeters, but it is straight and shows no deviations. Trace I input is set to AC DC block, and the input sensitivity is turned up to about 1 millivolt per centimeter. The DC component would give a deflection of 1,200 centimeters, but the DC has been blocked. The low-level ripple can now be clearly seen. In practice, with the circuit shown, little or no ripple should be seen, but when a load is placed on the power supply, the ripple may even become quite objectionable, depending upon the component values chosen. It is also very interesting to see that the ripple frequency will be 100 Hz or 10 milliseconds between the peaks. This is because of the action of a full-wave bridge rectifier. The time-based selector switch will most probably have an XY position even on the cheapest of oscilloscopes. This can be used for a variety of new functions, such as Lysage's figures. Pretty frequency measurements, but very accurate. Other equipment such as wobulators and analyzers. HFTX modulation. Quick and convenient. The XY time-based selector position disconnects the internal generator that moves a spot across the screen. Input B will now move the spot across the screen, but input A will still make the spot move up and down. Lysage's figures. By way of example, Connect two leads to channel I and channel B inputs, then hold with your bare hands the center conductor of both the wires. You will see the same rubbish as you did before, but this time there will be differences between the two signals. This will work even better if two people each hold one of the two wires. If the two signals were exactly identical, then the spot would move up and to the right, then down and to the left. This would be seen as a horizontal line diagonally across the screen. A loop would be seen if the two signals were exactly the same frequency, but different waveform or phase. If the two signals were perfect sine waves and differed by exactly 90-degree phase, then you would see the following waveform. If you have access to an AF sine wave signal generator, then connect an RC circuits to one input and a CR circuit to the other input of the scope. Notice how the circle slope changes as the frequency is altered. If the phase were to constantly change, slightly different frequency, then you would see a square block formed by I. Moving image changing from a left sloping line, a circle, a right sloping line, a circle, then back to a left sloping line again. If the two sine waves were to differ in frequency by exactly 2:1, then you will see something like this. Notice that in the vertical plane y-axis equals channel 2, there is only one peak, but in the horizontal plane x-axis equals channel 1, there are two peaks. Channel 1 is therefore twice the frequency of channel 2. With other frequency combinations, the waveform may become even more complex, for example 3 to 2, 8 to 3, 2 to 5, etc. Wobulator. Many circuits have been published for wobulators. A wobulator generates a varying radio frequency that moves in sympathy with a sawtooth or triangular waveform. If the sawtooth is applied to the Y horizontal input of the oscilloscope, the RF signal can be applied to the X vertical input via a receiver if amplifier, tune circuit, filter, etc. The vertical axis will then give a display of the frequency response of the amplifier. Here we can see that the left-hand peak is not quite as high as the right-hand peak, which means that the if response is not perfect, although it is not bad enough to be noticed by the ear. Most single-beam oscilloscopes have a time-base output which can be used to make a voltage-controlled oscillator sweep through the frequencies of interest. I will be posting a simple wobulator circuit soon. It has been tried and tested over a number of years. Spectrum analyzer. It is quite possible to build a simple spectrum analyzer for use with an oscilloscope in much the same way as a wobulator. A spectrum analyzer is a device that can display a range of frequencies simultaneously or a range of frequencies so fast that it looks continuous. If the local oscillator of a superheat receiver was made to sweep through a range of frequencies dictated by the time-base output of your oscilloscope, and the X vertical axis of the oscilloscope monitored an AM detector at the if, then you would have a spectrum analyzer. A typical analyzer display looks something like this. Here we see that there are several radio signals displayed simultaneously. This would be typical of a display from 0 to 9 MHz with a scale of 1 MHz per division. The large spike at the left of the screen would be the 0 MHz marker. This display shows a couple of small signals at about 1.5 and 1.9 MHz, 6.0 MHz, 7.1 MHz, and 7.9 MHz. Larger signals are shown at about 2.5 MHz, 3.2 MHz, 4.3 MHz, and 5.5 MHz. The baseline is cluttered with noise, often referred to as grass. Harmonics and other spurious emissions may be observed from an amateur transmitter. Many HF radio receivers have a narrowband spectrum analyzer built into the receiver. These are operated from the receiver if amplifier before the filter. In this case, they are called a panoramic display, panoramic adapter, or something equally obscure. QRP-DX signals would be at very low signal levels in the grass, so a pan adapter is not particularly useful. Above is the block diagram of a simple spectrum analyzer that will cover the complete HF bands from 0 to 30 MHz. I have done some experiments with this in the past, and I may post circuits sometime in the future. Modulation. In days of old, when nights were bold and toilets were not invented, it was very easy to use an oscilloscope to check the purity of an amateur transmitter when only AM and CW was in use. All that was required was to couple the Y input of the scope to the microphone, then loosely couple the X input to the antenna, just place it near the antenna, coax, or connect it to the transmitter chassis. With the above setup, you would see a trapezoidal waveform, something like this. CD minus AB divided by CD is equal to the modulation depth. In this example, the modulation depth is 6 minus 2, divided by 6, or 4 6 equals 66%. The upper and lower sloping lines are straight, showing that the modulation characteristic of the transmitter is linear. CW may be monitored by loosely coupling one input channel of the oscilloscope to the transmitter antenna. Just place it near the antenna coax or connect it to the transmitter chassis and set the scope time base to, say, 100 milliseconds/div. Send a load of DIDs and observe the waveform. Nice rounded edges are ideal, but square envelopes are the sign of a badly adjusted CW transmitter. Leading spikes would render the transmitter illegal in most countries, except Saudi Arabia. If you wish to do continuous measurements, then it could be a good idea to make a multivibrator oscillator to switch a transistor in the transmitter key input. This will give a regular and continuous CW envelope for design and development of CW transmitters. If a two-tone audio signal is connected to an SSB transmitter microphone input and the oscilloscope is loosely coupled to the transmitter antenna, the following waveform will be displayed when using the scope's internal time base. A flattening of the peaks indicated that some stage has been overdriven, and a lack of dip between envelopes shows an excessive carrier level. This display can show quite a lot of things about the waveform, but this is beyond the scope of this page. Probes. Oscilloscope probes are pretty neat things. They can be armed with a plethora of clips, hooks, and other assorted paraphernalia. One of the most common widgets in a commercial scope probe is a resistive voltage divider that increases the maximum voltage range of the oscilloscope. Unfortunately, they use coaxial cable, even the expensive ones, although none of them are cheap. A coaxial cable possesses capacitance. Therefore, this capacitance is placed across any signal fed into your expensive scope, and this will have an effect on the waveform displayed. Consider a simple resistive voltage divider used with a bit of coaxial cable, in the diagram below. Here we see that the 1 million ohm resistor is placed in series with a capacitor, the coaxial cable, which is a simple 6 dB per octave low-pass filter. A square waveform should look like a below, but with the above probe, it will look more like C below. If the 1 million ohm resistor is shunted with a small capacitor, as in B above, it will correct the situation, but the value of the capacitor is quite critical. If the value is too small, then the waveform will look like C below. If too large of a value, it will look more like B below. If the correction capacitor is correctly selected, then the waveform will look like waveform A. Many oscilloscopes have a 1 kHz square wave reference output for calibration purposes. The waveform is usually 1 volt peak to peak, so the oscilloscope display should be 1 centimeter high using the 1 volt per centimeter input level setting. If your oscilloscope does not have a calibration output, then you can easily build one using a CD4060 IC as an oscillator or divider from an 8192 kHz crystal. This circuit has the added advantage that there are also other outputs at much higher frequencies, up to 1.024 MHz, for an even more accurate HF correction of your homebrew scope probe. And finally, I hope that this short page has given you a little food for thought and that even the more experienced operator has learned something. If you think I have forgotten anything basic or important, then please send me email. All constructive suggestions will be gratefully received. If you have any complaints, then please address them to easymoney@con.artistinc. Or any other spammer who you hate. If you need suggestions, then I will gladly send you a few addresses. Have fun. To Harry, Lunda, Sweden. Original article. www.sm0vpo.com.
Swap and Shop. The Swap and Shop is completely free to list your items. Send your list in soon to make the next Tuesday night TechNet and Reflector magazine. Send your information to ve3bz@rogers.com. Visit the ECR shop at eastcoastreflector.com. Most items are 15 to 30% off. Get t-shirts with your call sign starting at $17.68, mugs for $11.20, phone cases from $18.16, and hoodies from $38 up to 3X.
Lithium Battery Care by Ron, AA4HO from the editor. Batteries can be dangerous. You, and only you, are responsible for yourself, not ECR or the author. Use common sense and follow manufacturer's directions. On to the article. Here are the procedures to best care for and get the best performance from lithium-type batteries. This goes for the standard lithium-ion as well as the lithium iron phosphate. While lithium iron phosphate batteries are more robust and have a longer cycle life compared to standard lithium-ion batteries, The charging details will give all types of lithium batteries the safest charging procedure, as well as the best performance and the longest life. It is important to know the way to properly charge and care for them. Contrary to other rechargeable batteries that are required to be fully discharged before charging, lithium batteries should be given shallow charges. The impact of 10 shallow charges is equivalent to 1 charge on a lithium battery near 20%. It is better to remove a lithium battery from the charger when it reaches 85% to 90% of the full charge. The best charge cycle is to charge the lithium battery when it is discharged to around 50%, then remove the battery from the charger before it reaches 90% of a full charge. Wait 1 hour after using a lithium battery before beginning to charge it. Wait at least an hour after charging before using the battery for the higher capacity types. Never leave a lithium battery on a charger after it reaches the maximum charge. Following these procedures will give the best conditions for the batteries to last the longest. This will give the battery the best performance. This maintains the lithium battery with higher voltages to operate devices. To help calibrate the battery's internal monitoring system, especially in lithium-ion batteries with complex battery management systems, it's a good practice to do a full discharge down to around 10% or lower every 30 to 40 shallow charge cycles. This can help recalibrate the battery's internal fuel gauge, providing more accurate readings of the remaining charge. So to get the best performance and longest life, mostly do shallow charges. Neglecting the occasional full discharge will not harm the battery as much as if the battery is always charged this way. Abusing a lithium-ion type battery can run the risk of a catastrophic failure, but taking care as mentioned above can be useful to decrease the risk. Lithium iron phosphate batteries don't have as much risk of failure, but abusing these batteries can lead to diminished capacity. The charging method used mostly relates to the longest a lithium-type battery can perform. To reduce the risk of a lithium battery fire, always charge lithium batteries in a location where damage would be minimized if a battery catches fire. Buying a fire blanket to have in the unlikely event of a fire is a good idea. Knowing your type of lithium battery is important. Follow the general procedures for lithium-type batteries. Read and follow the manufacturer's recommendations. The goal is to get the most out of the investment from the most popular, useful, and powerful batteries used in modern electronic and mechanical devices while reducing the risk of a fire that can cause physical harm or property damage. Remember that lithium-ion batteries are different from older-style rechargeable batteries. Lithium-type batteries have different ways to be charged. This will decrease the chances of early failure and provide the best experience with the modern devices that use them. All the best, Ron, AA4HO. Use common sense and follow manufacturer's safety instructions.
You should know. The East Coast Reflector and its Reflector magazine is all volunteer run. We charge nothing to use the system. We charge nothing to subscribe to the magazine. The system has hundreds of users connected at any given time. We incur a lot of expenses to maintain such a large system. If you use the system or enjoy the magazine, please consider helping by contributing to the system by going to eastcoastreflector.com and click on Donate. Your contribution is greatly appreciated.
Calendar. All times are Eastern. The following events are on the Reflector. For connection information, go to bit.ly/ECRconnect. Check out the Morning Brew Net on your way to work. Weekdays from 7 to 9 a.m. It can be pretty fast-paced. If you like a slower, more ragged net, stick around on Fridays for the second cup at 9 a.m. Have a technical question? Stop by the Tech Net Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. to ask your questions or offer your advice. On Sundays, listen to Amateur Radio Newsline at 1 p.m. and again on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. We've also got HF Nets. On Thursdays at 10 a.m. join the 20-meter net on 14.317. And on Saturday mornings join us for the 40-meter net at 9 a.m. on 7.245. For the following events, stop by the ECR Zoom room at bit.ly/ECRdaily. Every day at 3:30 p.m. stop by for advice or just casual conversation. On the first and third Thursdays at 8 p.m. Check out the Ask an Elmer Zoom room for people to seek information.
and get answers with the utmost respect, or to offer help to hams where you can just stop by and listen. On the second and fourth Thursdays at 8 p.m. is the ECR Think Tank, where users help to come up with and execute new ideas to help keep the ECR moving forward. Everyone is welcome to stop by and check it out.
Crossword page. Try the birthday call sign word search puzzle. Click on the magazine page and solve it online or to print it. If you'd like to be added to our birthday list, go to bit.ly/EasterBirthday.
Celebrity Call Sign by KD2TFB. Dick Rutan, KB6LQS. Non-stop flight around the world. Dick was born July 1, 1938. He was a retired veteran of the U.S. Air Force, serving in the Vietnam War. While in the service, he served many roles and earned many rewards. These include the Distinguished Flying Cross, a Purple Heart, Air Force Commendation Medal, Air Force Presidential Unit Citation, Air Force Outstanding Unit Award with Valor, Combat Readiness Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Vietnam Service Medal with 3 Bronze Campaign Stars, Air Force Longevity Service Award, Small Arms Expert Marksmanship Ribbon, Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross, and a Vietnam Campaign Medal. But, the feat for which he is probably more well known is the non-stop flight around the world in 1986, aboard Voyager, with Gina Yeager. This would be Dick Rutan, KB6LQS. He became a silent key on May 3, 2024 at the age of 85 due to pulmonary fibrosis as a complication of long COVID-19. As with many of these articles, the primary source of this is the English language Wikipedia, and therefore subject to the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4.0 license.
Net questions. Here's a list of most of our net questions. Ever wonder how your answer compares? Click the question to see the results. There's questions from the Morning Brew, the TechNet, TriviaNet, and YouthNet. And even the HF nets.
ECR log sheets. Our log sheets are one of a kind. You can get to them 2 ways. You can either go to eastcoastreflector.com and go to the net page. There's a link there. Or you can go to bit.ly/ECR logs and select the log you'd like to view. Net snapshots. Here you'll find charts and information from recent nets. Here's the Morning Brew, the TechNet, the TriviaNet, the YouthNet, and the HF nets. We have nets Monday through Saturday and amateur radio newsline on Wednesday and Sunday. Our aeronautical mobile ECR Air 1 net information will be announced when the information becomes available. Ham pictures. We had a lot of people stop by and see us at Orlando vacation. Here's a few. That Friday night, approximately 30 hams joined our annual dinner. This year it was at Miller's Ale House. This year was a little different. The ECR awarded a plaque to Vicky, KE8VKY, its first recipient of Amateur of the Year. Some of the facilitators made stops along the way, including a stop for burgers at Rogers, KO4QMM. Many hams stopped by to check out Dick, WB2, JPQ's portable repeater. Many people stopped by and added faces to voices. Grayson, KG4BUT, won a new radio. If you didn't get a chance to stop by, know that we still appreciate you.
Reflector etiquette. We don't have strict rules, but we do have guidelines that help make the best experience for everyone. This is a very large system with hundreds of connections at any given time. All of these repeaters and nodes can take a few short seconds to receive your audio, so key up and wait 2 seconds before you start to talk. Some repeaters have longer delays than others. Please feel free to use the Listen Live audio on the eastcoastreflector.com website to hear if you're cutting yourself off. Keep your transmissions to less than 3 minutes. You won't only time out your repeater but many others. Limit QSOs to 15 minutes. With hundreds of people, everyone needs a chance to talk. For the same reasons, leave 3-second breaks between transmissions. If you don't leave a break, the system doesn't know that you aren't still the last person and the time will compound and time out the system. Politics and religion are very important and we respect your opinion and beliefs, but this isn't the place for its discussion. Politics and religion make people too emotional to maintain a family-friendly environment. Only use break or break in an emergency. Listen before you speak. Don't interrupt a QSO or a net for a radio check. You only need to ID every 10 minutes. People tend to get carried away and say it after every transmission even if they're transmitting every minute. A lot of hams don't appreciate CB terms like 10-4, good buddy, home 20, personal, or Roger. The reflector is over the internet. Everyone hears the same audio. There's rarely a need for the use of phonetics. Make sure your email on QRZ is public. This is the way people can contact you, especially if there is an issue with your node or repeater that you may not be aware of. Lastly, fix poor audio. If you need help with your audio, we'd love to help. Stop by the ECR Zoom room at bit.ly/ECR Daily. Check out the ECR website at eastcoastreflector.com. You can use the monitor to see who's talking with the last heard feature. Go to the contact menu and submit suggestions for the TechNet or Morning Brew questions. Ask general questions you need help with or report issues. Other features include a map of no full-time repeaters, a link to joinourgroups.io, a link to the ECR Zoom room, links to each net and their log sheet, the ECR shop, and of course the Reflector magazine.
Facilitators. In no particular order. WB2JPQ Dick, the founding father. Or should I say godfather of the ECR? He does everything. KB2SNM Bob. He's been around since the beginning of the ECR. He's known as the junkyard dog. He's right on top of any issues to ensure that people don't get out of line and ensure family-friendly airwaves. KB5GLC Canaan. A vital part of the ECR and one of its data centers. He's a much appreciated part of the team. K4FXC David. Hamvup himself. An essential part of the ECR, also as its data center. K7K Kevin. With over 14,000 users, Kevin maintains our database, sets up amateur radio news line to be played over ECR, announcements, and many other things including the TechNet. KO4FRR Joe. Joe is the man who makes the text line possible. He's also the webmaster and computer guy. You can meet him at Orlando Hamcation or at the ECR meet and greets. W2RBC Randy. He's one of the magazine authors, heads our groups.io, and ECR think tank, and you'll also find him on our HF nets. He's always a good resource of information and always willing to help. K2CMT Mike. The infamous Morning Brew net controller. Without him, the Morning Brew probably would have never developed. Mike has the Kentucky ability to turn a 4-syllable word into one. KD2VNU, Dan is the Youth Net director. You'll find him behind the scenes during the Youth Net helping the kids to make the magic happen. KY4ATF, Rome. Rome is the guy that made our website the best in the industry. Don't believe me? Check it out at eastcoastreflector.com. W2KJV Tony. Our YouTube man. He takes the pictures you send in and puts them into a video for everyone to see. K8BAC Al. Al is a net controller of the Morning Brew and of our 40-meter net. He's a recent, very welcomed addition to our team. N2BH Bill. Bill is a net controller for the Morning Brew, and he's a great help at ECR events and hamfests. W2PUT Dan. Dan is both one of the newest and oldest facilitators on the ECR team. He helped to start the ECR and has recently had time to return and help out on the Ask an Elmer, as well as write a few magazine articles and help out at ECR events and Hamfests. K8VKY Vicky. Vicky is the editor of the ECR. Made and maintains the logs with the help of K7K, and can usually be found on the net's logging. She's also ECR's first amateur of the year. V3BZE Kevin. Canada Kevin. He's our nighttime security guard. He takes care of the system while the rest of us sleep. You'll also find him once in a while logging for Alex, W7FTM on the Trivia Net. We'd also like to mention some of our other contributors. W2BLT Scott. Morning Brew Net Coordinator and Net Controller. K0GKF Jeff. Morning Brew Net Controller. W7FTM Alex. Trivia Net Controller and Creator. KO4QMM Roger. 20-meter Net Controller and sometimes the Tech Net. And our Youth Net Controllers. KD2YHC Luca. KG4BUT Grayson. KD2YFO Aiden. Please pray for Cindy, wife of Charles, KC6UFM. KC9TW. Jeff. Jeff was nearly taken down by cancer, but conquered it in under a year. Please pray for his continued recovery. KB2UDB Mike and his wife. Silent Keys. WB2RFK. Kenneth of Archdale, North Carolina. Please keep these people and their families in their prayers in their time of need.
Disclaimer. The content, opinions, and views expressed in this magazine are those of the authors and contributors and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of the publisher, editorial team, or affiliated organizations, or anyone else. All articles, images, and information provided are for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. The publisher, ECR, and its volunteers assume no responsibility for errors or omissions in the content provided. Readers are encouraged to verify all information independently. The use of trademarks, logos, and brand names does not imply endorsement. Reproduction or redistribution of any content in this magazine, in whole or in part, without prior written consent from the publisher, is strictly prohibited. For inquiries or permissions, please contact Vicky, KE8VKY at KE8VKY@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to the Reflector magazine. If you'd like to subscribe, go to bit.ly/ECR subscribe and enter your email.